Hello, I am Peter Okwacha. Welcome to Focus on Africa, our top stories. The World Bank pledges $12 billion to help developing countries fight the spread of the coronavirus and its economic impact. We're joined from Washington by the World Bank's Director of Health. Joe Biden emerges as the Democratic frontrunner after Super Tuesday voting. We get the view from an African activist in America. Also on the program, feeling the pinch. As China's wet markets shut down due to coronavirus, demand for South Africa's lobster is plummeting. Fishermen warn the industry could be decimated.
Many vessels have stopped. People haven't got jobs. Factory workers are working. So it's become very serious.
And we take you through the doors of the Masjid Musa Mosque in Mombasa, once a hotbed for radicalization, now repurposed as a peace center. And in sports, the first major event in Africa falls victim to the coronavirus. Thanks for joining us here on Focus on Africa from BBC World Service. The World Bank has pledged a $12 billion aid package that will provide funds to help countries combat the coronavirus outbreak. Some of the funds, which are targeted at the world's poorest nations, can be used for medical equipment or health services. And the International Monetary Fund has just warned that the worsening impact of the coronavirus is likely to push global economic growth below last year's level. We'll be looking closer at the economic impact of the outbreak on Africa in a moment. But first, here's a roundup of the latest from the continent. Senegal has confirmed its second case of coronavirus, bringing the number of cases on the continent to 12. Sudan will be evacuating almost 150 students from Wuhan, the epicenter of the virus in China. The students will be quarantined in the UAE. The Somali government says it will quarantine visitors from any virus-hit countries for 20 days. Zimbabwe will require all visitors from affected countries to produce medical certificates showing they've tested negative for the virus. And Catholic bishops in Ghana have advised priests to give Holy Communion by hand instead of placing it on people's tongues. Catholics have also been advised to avoid shaking hands during the service. Well, let's delve deeper into the economic impact this outbreak could have for Africa. I'm now joined by Dr. Mohamed Ali Pate, the Global Director for Health, Nutrition and Population at the World Bank. Dr. Pate, what exactly is the current situation in Africa?
Thank you. I think this is an evolving situation where several countries in Africa are already standing up their systems to detect the virus if it gets to their shores, and also their response capability, working with the African Centers for Disease Control and national public health institutions.
Now, I understand that the World Bank has set aside this $12 billion and will distribute it amongst countries that request for it. Have you had any requests from African countries yet?
Yes, we have received several country requests. Overall, globally, more than 34 countries have indicated their interest in terms of support. 14 have requested formally in terms of resources to stand up their detection capability, their clinical care systems, their equipment, reagents, and also human resources capabilities to respond. Those requests are coming on, and we expect more to come in the days ahead, following the announcement of the $12 billion package.
Now, you mentioned the $12 billion package. The IMF has also announced a $10 billion package. Is this a measure of how serious you're taking this? Because during the Ebola outbreak about 6 years ago, the World Bank only furnished a $400 million package.
This is one of the most significant outbreaks that we've seen in the last few years. And I think the seriousness with which we're all coming together with WHO, with other multilateral institutions, reflects that. And countries are already responding, but need to step up, given that it could get more severe than it is at the moment.
Now, you've been Minister of Health in Nigeria before. Apart from these packages coming from international agencies such as yours, what should local governments within the continent be doing to keep their people safe?
First of all, what this exemplifies is the need for preparedness before an outbreak such as this occurs by building core health systems, primary healthcare systems that can then help countries respond. As we have seen in Nigeria, when the polio infrastructure played a major role in Nigeria's ability to stop Ebola in 2014. So as we build these systems for the emergency response, countries need to really see investments in their health security, not only from the narrow health services perspective, but from the implication that it can have on the wider economy, both public as well as the private sector. And just to add that the package that the World Bank announced also has a significant component to support the private sector in responding to the consequences of this outbreak. Okay, Dr.
Mohammed Ali Pate from the World Bank, thank you very much for talking to us here on the program. Well, in Kenya, activists are demanding more action from the government in response to coronavirus. Our reporter Emmanuel Igunza was at the protest with this update.
Well, the Kenyan government has faced a lot of backlash over how it has handled preparedness for any eventual outbreak of the coronavirus. And this group has organized itself online, as has come together. Today they have gone to the Ministry of Health, to the Ministry of Interior, now heading towards the Foreign Affairs Minister with one message. They want the government to be better prepared. They've been calling for those students who've been stuck in Wuhan, China, to be repatriated back home. And they're also saying they need more constant information from the government regarding this outbreak.
Though it is a global problem, the Kenyan government is not instilling any confidence in us as Kenyans to show us that they are doing anything about it.
We think that the government is lax in the way it's handling the whole issue because we know we are not ready. They're telling us that our hospitals are only 11 beds.
Well, the Kenyan president has already announced an emergency team that will lead coordination, preparedness for any eventuality, including if a case is reported in the country. We do know there is an isolation ward that has been set up here in the capital. Also, medical workers are being trained constantly, and the health ministry says that it is already in the process of procuring more medical protective equipment should that be needed in the country.
Emmanuel Igunza reporting there, and we'll have more on the coronavirus later on the program. But first, let's go to the U.S. now, where former American Vice President Joe Biden is celebrating a surge in support in the race to become the Democratic Party candidate to challenge President Trump in November. 14 states held primaries last night in what's known as Super Tuesday. In a moment, we'll get the view from an African activist in the U.S. on the Democratic nominations. But first, Shona McCollum reports on the results.
Centrist candidate Joe Biden emerged as the winner in 9 of the 14 states, including Texas.
So I'm here to report we are very much alive. And make no mistake about it, this campaign will send Donald Trump packing.
The left-wing Senator Bernie Sanders is predicted to take the other 4, including the largest, California.
But we're going to win because the people understand it is our campaign, our movement, which is best positioned to defeat Trump.
This means Joe Biden is now the new frontrunner in the race to be the Democratic Party candidate to challenge Donald Trump for the White House in November. As for the other candidates, former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg is now out of the race. Senator Elizabeth Warren suffered defeat to Mr. Biden in her home state of Massachusetts. Super Tuesday is always a strong indicator of the likely eventual winner, and after last night, is looking more and more like a two-man race. Shona McCallum, BBC News.
Let's now speak to Zara Shirak, a Somali American activist. A few weeks ago, Zara, people had written former Vice President Joe Biden off. Are you surprised at his strong showing on Super Tuesday?
It is a bit surprising, but in a way it is not. once we found out the incomparable black leader, Jim Clyburn of South Carolina, was supporting him, it became very clear that he is going to get the support of the black community in South Carolina, and that's all he needed to push forward.
And as you mentioned there, he did target that black vote as well as the women's vote in the South. Why do you think the others seem to neglect this very important, or these very important blocks?
Well, that is the mystery, but it is no surprise to anybody who watches and follows American politics that especially during the primaries, the black community's vote is vital, and it could not have been more evident this time. Like you said, Joe Biden was left for dead 2 weeks ago, only to be revived. And not only did he win, but he won big in South Carolina. And you know, like I said, it can all be attributed to Jim Clyburn, who is a beloved and revered black leader all the way from the civil rights movement. And so once he stood next to him and said, "This is my guy," that's all that the black community needed. And it has always been known that the black community's vote is reliable. They come out and vote once they know where you stand on certain issues.
Now, you've mentioned the African American vote as well as the women's vote. What about the black diaspora votes, those who have migrated to the States from Africa? What can you tell us about that?
Well, I can tell you that the black African newcomers, as we call ourselves, has very much been for Bernie Sanders, especially the Somali diaspora community, because our Congresswoman, Ilhan Omar, who, as you know, is originally from Somalia, the Minnesota Congresswoman, was a very strong supporter of Bernie Sanders. But it also showed that Bernie Sanders, who was not shy about his support for the African communities, for the Muslim communities, which Somalis happen to be both, was very important to us. So the Somali community overwhelmingly voted for Bernie Sanders.
Okay, Zara, it seems to be a two-horse race now. Can I just put you on the spot and ask you to make a quick prediction?
I think the momentum is obviously with Joe Biden, but nobody should count Bernie Sanders out, because he has a strong grassroots movement.
Okay.
He has a system in place, and I think it would be a mistake to count him out, especially now that we have seen the ups and downs of these elections.
Okay, Zara Sherwak, an African activist in North Carolina. Thank you very much for speaking to us here on Focus in Africa.
Thank you for speaking to me.
This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News with me, Peter Okwoche. Still to come, Ghana football boss Kwesi Nyantakyi is charged with fraud. I'm Peter Okwoche. The top story this hour. The World Bank is pledging $12 billion to help developing countries fight the spread of the coronavirus and its economic impact. Well, the effect of that economic impact of the coronavirus is being felt far and wide, even in countries which haven't reported any confirmed cases yet. In South Africa, for instance, the fishing industry is taking a huge knock. 90% of the country's lobster catch is exported to China. But when the wet markets were shut down in China as a result of the virus, the export market collapsed overnight. Andrew Harding sent this report from South Africa's Western Cape.
An hour before dawn, and South Africa's lobstermen steer out into the gloom, on the lookout for rocks and whales and great white sharks.
This is the bait for the lobsters. For the lobsters, yes.
Neville and Tino have been fishing these waters for decades. But out of the blue, disaster has struck, as sudden as an Atlantic storm. Their precious catch has lost half its value, and all because of a virus a world away from here.
That's a good one? Yes.
A good one, but almost no one is buying.
You can't sell the lobster?
We can't sell it.
And what does that mean for you and your family?
I'm struggling to pay my rent, to pay my power. Nothing food. Nothing food on the table for the children.
And all this because of the virus in China?
The virus in China. All of this.
At the nearby harbour, a handful of bigger boats unload their catch. but it's hardly worth the effort now. 90% of all South African lobsters are, normally, flown straight to China. And overnight, that vast market has shut down, leaving millions of lobsters stranded. Their flights to Beijing or Hong Kong postponed indefinitely, and a whole industry here adrift.
Many vessels have stopped. People haven't got jobs. Factory workers aren't working. So it's become very serious. And
can the industry survive this?
Very few will be able to survive if this continues much longer.
It is extraordinary how quickly a public health crisis in faraway China can spell economic disaster for a community like this one. That's globalization for you. But there is a warning here too, for countries and industries that have taken Chinese growth, Chinese demand for granted.
And lobsters aren't the only shellfish left to flounder. On this farm, 3 million abalone are growing plump on seaweed, a curious delicacy cultivated exclusively for Chinese menus, but now in urgent need of new fans.
Convince the British to enjoy the strange delights of abalone.
Yes, if you could teach the rest of the world to also enjoy this delicacy, that would be awesome.
In the meantime, Tino and his colleagues have no choice but to keep fishing. Better for them to earn half price than nothing at all. Andrew Harding, BBC News, South Africa.
You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. It's now time for some sports. Victoria is here.
Thank you, Peter. Now, the start of the first season of the Basketball Africa League has been postponed due to the fear of the spread of the coronavirus. The BAL's inaugural season was due to begin in the Senegalese capital on the 13th of March. The BBC Sport Africa's Babacar Diarra in Dakar has more.
The decision to delay the inaugural Basketball Africa League was taken overnight. The organizers, NBA and FIBA, say they decided to postpone the start of the season over fears of the coronavirus, as 3 of the hosting countries, Nigeria, Tunisia and Senegal, have been affected. No new date has been given. This new league is set to feature 12 teams from across the continent, but only the first group of 6 teams were about to gather at the Dakar Arena, a 15,000-seat venue for the beginning of this first ball. 5 games were supposed to be played over the weekend, with teams representing Senegal, Mali, Algeria, Madagascar, Morocco and Angola. NBA Africa told me teams had planned on gathering in Senegal for the training ahead of the games. However, they said they didn't want to put anybody at risk, from the players or coaching staff to the fans. 2 coronavirus cases have been confirmed in Senegal, and the Football Federation are meeting the authorities next week ahead of the national team games against Guinea-Bissau, scheduled at the end of the month. Coronavirus will most likely be at the agenda.
Well, a high court in Accra has charged the former football boss Kwesi Nyantakyi with fraud. He pleaded not guilty to the charges that arose from a BBC undercover investigation in 2018, which exposed corruption in African football. In the documentary, Mr. Nyantakyi was filmed taking $65,000 from an undercover reporter. He dismissed the investigation, but soon after he resigned from his post within FIFA and the Confederation of African Football. He's been granted bail before his next hearing on the 25th of March. On to cricket now. In South Africa face host and reigning champions Australia on Thursday in the semi-finals of the Women's T20 World Cup in Sydney. The Proteas captain Dan van Niekerk says they are looking forward to the game and will give it their all. She also shared her thoughts on their run, luck and what role the weather down under has played.
Yes, it works in our favour, 100%. But if I was on the other end, I'd probably be really upset, because everybody works really hard to get here. So to lose out because of weather is probably not ideal, and I don't think it should be like that. So I think I definitely believe in the future, especially semi-finals, finals, there should be reserve days. We said from the start, from the World Cup, this is the best chance South Africa has to win a World Cup. We've got the best team. We're going to focus on what we do well and forget about the records. It doesn't matter in a high-pressured game like tomorrow, and hopefully we can get one up on them for the first time in, I guess, forever.
Victor Wanyama has thanked Tottenham Hotspur's fans following his move to the Canadian side Montreal Impact on a free transfer. He has signed a 3-year deal with the club who play in the North America's Major League Soccer. The Kenyan international only made 4 appearances for Spurs this season, with his only start coming in the Carabao Cup loss at Colchester United in September. His time at Spurs was blighted with injuries, limiting him to just 47 appearances in all competitions since he joined the North London team in 2016. Peter, that's all the sport.
Many thanks, Victoria. Thank you very much. Now, Masjid Musa, a mosque in Kenya's tourist island of Mombasa, was at one time amongst the most notorious for radicalization. One of its clerics, Sheikh Aboud Rogo, was linked to both Al-Qaeda and Al-Shabaab. In 2012, he was killed by unknown gunmen, sparking violent protests that left several people dead. The mosque has now been transformed into a center for reconciliation and peace building. The BBC's Ferdinand Omondi reports from Mombasa.
February 2014. A mosque in central Mombasa, the Masjid Musa, is raided. Police say it has been turned into a center for recruiting youths to join militant group Al-Shabaab. Authorities impound grenades, propaganda material, and flags associated with the Al-Shabaab. More than 100 people, mostly young men, are arrested. Masjid Musa becomes a crime scene and security agents lock it down. Youth-led riots become frequent and tenants start moving out of nearby apartments. Worshippers and regional leaders meet in a bid to reopen the mosque. All mosque officials deemed controversial are replaced, and the state eventually hands the mosque back to the people after being satisfied with the reform measures put in place. Among the reforms is a delicate process to reintegrate radicalized youth.
We did not use guns. We prayed and used kind words. Village and mosque elders engaged the entire community to convince the young people to change their ways.
Salim is one of those young men. He says he participated in the riots but has since been reintegrated into the mosque. But he worries that without jobs, many people like him remain vulnerable to recruitment. Kenya's unemployment rate stands at just under 10%.
The chronic issue is not just in Mombasa, but all of Kenya. Unemployment and idle minds. If one has a job, he leaves home early, goes to work and returns in the evening. The government needs to look at our plight.
Masjid Musa has now found peace. People no longer fear walking around here or living near the mosque as it was a few years ago. But beneath this veneer of calm, there are underlying issues around justice still waiting to be resolved.
This woman's husband was among the hundreds of people arrested at Masjid Musa during the anti-terror crackdowns. While many were later released, her husband disappeared. A judicial inquiry concluded that police may have killed Hamed Salim.
I am not satisfied at all. The government is supposed to tell us where he is, because they're the ones who took him. We saw them take him.
It's been 5 years, and while there's still some pain, the message of peace seems to be working, not just in the community around the Masjid Musa Mosque, but across the city of Mombasa. Ferdinand Omondi, BBC News, Mombasa.
And don't forget, you can get in touch with me on social media. I'm at Okwacha. But for now, that's it from Focus on Africa. Thanks for watching. See you again very soon.